Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Lynn with Yoga Story Express, and today I am here with Cynthia. Good afternoon, Cynthia. How are you today?
Hi, Lynn. I'm great. How are you?
Good. Just for everybody listening at home, I am on my back porch, so if you hear any little things in the background, that's why. I'm home with a sick kid. So Cynthia is joining me via Zoom from her office, and we are in the process at Yoga Story of interviewing people to tell their quote yoga stories. As one of the kind of main things that our original founder, Cindy Johnson, who founded Yoga Story back in 2010, came up with the name Yoga Story because yoga tells a story through the body. And then every body's body has a story. So that's where yoga story came from. So we've been interviewing different people, and Cynthia's been one that's been on my list. And just tell us, Cynthia, when did you start? When did you start yoga?
I started yoga actually 27 years ago. I was pregnant with my second child and was dealing with a lot of back pain and saw a prenatal yoga class and thought, well, that might be a really good way to deal with that, as well as, the anxiety benefits and things like that. So took a class and I was hooked.
Yeah, and that's something I like that when people get involved in yoga when they're pregnant, because we don't really talk enough when about the anxiety that does come with being pregnant, especially it was your second son, but with any pregnancy, there's risks, there's complications, your body is changing, you are growing a new human inside of you. So there's this natural level of anxiety that occurs. And we have a really great prenatal program that Melissa, just a little shout out to Melissa Udy, who has put that together for our prenatal community. But yeah, 27 years ago, you've been
Yeah.
practicing for longer than I have.
Well, I don't claim to be good about it. I mean,
Oh,
it's a practice, right?
right.
But you always have to keep going. But I continue to try.
Yeah. And so when did you land at Yoga Story?
I landed at Yoga Story in 2019. We moved here in 2017, and I looked around for a while trying to find where my spot in the yoga community was. And Yoga Story offered uh, a lot of things that interested me. And so it ended up being a great choice.
Now 2019 as such a pivotal year for a lot of people because it was like it literally was the end of an era. For me, we transitioned from the space that we were in on the square to our Midtown building space where we're currently at. So you got to be in that space when we expanded, but it was also the last year that anything ever made sense
Yeah, so
before
true.
COVID hit.
COVID hit, and
And
so many things changed for all of us. And
yeah. So what would you say yoga has, before we kind of get into that portion of the story, what has yoga done for you, the benefits of your yoga practice throughout the 27 years that you've been practicing?
obviously, dealing with pain, I would say, is one of the biggest benefits. My joints always feel much better whenever I'm actively practicing and making sure that I'm doing it on a weekly basis. If I start complaining, my husband will say to me, "Have you done yoga lately?" And
Don't you hate it when they're
so
right?
it's like he kind of knows. But aside from that, I feel like yoga gives me this space of acceptance. A lot of times in a yoga class, a teacher will say to you, accept what you can do, basically, modify if you have to. Um, and we'll get into this more as we go through the interview, but I am a person who identifies with this having a disability. And so for me, the fact that I wouldn't say yoga's a sport, right? But the fact that I can do something with my body that it's okay to not be perfect at or competitive at. I'm just able to move in a comfortable space where I feel valued. I'd say that's the other thing about yoga that it does for me is it gives me that value of, yes, I can do this. Um, like I said earlier, I may not be good at it, but I can do this. Breath work. Uh,
Mm,
the list I'm going to have for you is probably going to take the
go
rest of
for
the
it.
podcast because it's crazy. Breath work, I was using breath work today. I had to do a very tiny speech in front of a big group. And as I was sitting there in the audience, I'm doing Ujjayi breath and, trying to calm myself down and being sure that I was ready for that. But just that meditation, that safe space and acceptance, that's really the other benefit that I would say is the biggest for me in my life, daily life.
Yeah. And I really like that you touched on the this isn't a sport.
Yeah.
It is athletic and that we do things with our bodies. And for me, I personally hate the whole yoga's not a workout, it's a work in because I mean, we are working out, like we are moving our bodies. There is physical fitness involved in it.
Yeah.
But as somebody, I know I feel feelings very strongly physically in my physical body. So for me, working out is a very spiritual experience for me. It's like battling my demons as I'm sweating and getting it out. So this is this athletic uh thing that we're taking place in that we're doing on our mats, but it's taking those different things that your teachers are teaching you from the yogic fundamentals to apply to that mental process that happens as you start to move your body, as you start to challenge your body, because we are going to offer you challenges in your body that everybody's body is going to do differently, but it is how do you step up to that challenge? What is going through your brain and the stories that you're telling yourself as you get into those poses, as opposed to the full getting into the full expression of the pose. That's
Mhm.
not the goal. The goal is what are you telling yourself on the way there?
Well,
Um,
and I, my previous employer had actually a gym downstairs within the building where I did a lot of yoga over the years. And so we would go down at lunch and just that stop of stopping and getting on your mat, your brain is thinking about something completely different. So when you think about dealing with the anxiety, but also coming out of that yoga session, the feeling of walking back to your desk and being like, I'm fine. The world is fine. I am in my little yoga, that feeling you get after a class where you just feel empowered, you feel like everything in your body is in sync again. I don't know how to describe it. It's just that after yoga glow, I guess.
we call it yoga stoned at the studio, that
That's
natural
it.
high, a little yoga stoned, because
Yeah.
people will walk out and they're like, I just walked out with your block. I just walked out and forgot my keys. I walked out, forgot my phone. What's wrong with me? And we're all like, we know
Yeah.
what's wrong with you.
But it sure was great to be able to walk back to your desk and be like, I don't really care what happened in that last meeting because I just did my yoga and I'm like so good. The mood shift of moving your body, of thinking, well, of changing your thought process, right? Focusing on your breath, focusing on the movement, doing those things just, you know, is a reset that I think we all need because like you said earlier, we all get so I feel things physically as well. Anxiety especially builds up, in your system and it's
Yeah.
like you can get it out and you can just have that expression of whatever the pose is, and then you are just in such a better headspace.
Yeah, anxiety is my best friend too. That was actually this morning I was having one of those just wake up and for whatever reason, anybody who's struggled with anxiety knows and understands it's not a why are you stressed out? What are
Right.
you anxious about? It is something that sometimes can just appear out of nowhere and it just comes up and your brain starts telling you all sorts of lies, and it starts telling you, at least for me, everything that could possibly go wrong in your
Yeah,
life all at
exactly.
once.
I
And
would
I
wake
had,
up anxious, and my husband's like, "Why are you anxious?" I'm like, I don't know,
I
but I woke
don't
up
know.
this
I've
way."
had people tell me that before. Like, what do you have to be stressed out about? I'm like, it's not about stress that you
Yeah,
don't understand. But then I had a big privilege of going and teaching a group private today for a bunch of ladies and a gentleman who were throwing a bachelorette party. So I taught like on love. We did some mudras, some lotus mudras, and a little bit of seated meditation with that, and then move them through that. And I was shaking. Like I'm that's how like the anxious part of me was like doing this with my Lotus Mudra, trying to get it like to calm down. But I did it with them. Since I didn't know them personally, I'm like, I'm
sure.
gonna do this with them to make sure that everybody knows the poses, as opposed to my normal people like you who come to my class a lot and you know what my kind of my usual MO and cueing and where
Yep.
I'm leading people. And I got to breathe and move and got back in my car afterwards. And I was like, yeah, that makes such a big difference. It doesn't even have to be an intense session, but just to be able to move your body and breathe and step outside those stories that our stupid brain says to us sometimes is so beneficial.
So
Um,
true.
so speaking of that, let's use my favorite word and pivot to COVID times when
Yeah.
everybody, I was like, stop using the word pivot. I don't want to hear ever again. It was also the most stressful time of my life because I had just had a new baby in 2018. 2019 was when we opened up in Midtown. And then 2020, I turned 40, shut down my studio on my birthday and went fully virtual. I know on my 40th birthday, I was supposed to be on a plane to Greece, and instead, I was shutting down my studio for COVID. And you were showing up for a lot of the outdoor classes
Yep.
that we did.
Correct.
We were fortunate enough to be able to go up to the third floor rooftop where the Walton Enterprises group let us use that for some outdoor classes so that we continue to have some of that. But then we also went fully virtual
Correct.
for a lot of those classes. And if you do any of the virtual classes, you may thank Cynthia for the continued virtual classes. Well, we could tell that story. Why don't you kind of start with the COVID part of it, and you go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. COVID was a pivotal time. Sorry to use the word, but it was a pivotal time for a lot of people. For me personally, and I'm going to get into my disability a little more here, is I actually was born with cataracts, so I'm considered legally blind. However, during COVID, I actually had a massive infection in my left eye, which took a lot of the vision that I had left in that eye. Still have some, but getting to a physical class was a challenge for me after that infection happened. In addition, I don't drive because of my visual impairment. And so having classes online to be able to take at my leisure, either through the YouTube channel or through the virtual offerings that you would have on a daily basis, became like this lifeline for me of being able to still do yoga as part of a community, and still be participating in something. There was a time there when I wasn't doing anything. And in fact, about the time, Lynn, that you mentioned, hey, to the community, you said, hey, we're going to stop virtual. And I was like, wait a minute, wait a minute. Hello, there's me out here, and I really still need those virtual classes. Um, and at that time, you were like, well, you haven't been to virtual class in a while. And I'm like, yeah, well, I had this infection, and here's the thing that's going on. And let me know if you'd be willing to still continue doing some virtual. And Lynn listened, which I appreciate so much. And you were gracious enough to continue the full schedule of what you guys were doing before, because obviously that was over the top and necessary for the time period that we were in. but you kept some of those virtual options. And for me, that is truly, as I said, it's a lifeline to be able to still feel like I'm a part of the community. I may not be walking in the door every week like a lot of people are, but I'm still able to practice in the comfort of my own home, my own living room, and still feel like I'm part of this great community that you've built with Yoga Story, Lynn.
Yeah. Well, and I will say I wrestled with that. I was like, man, I'd really would just love to not have to do this anymore. I would really like to just not like to take the easy route out and not put any more effort into this. And then I thought, no, no, no. Like if it matters to one person, like if she's really getting something out of it, then I'm going to try. And the big issue was that we were having internet connectivity issues. And
Yes.
we'd gone through a couple of also audio issues as well, but like when you have to pivot and, and go from being like I was a yoga teacher. I was not, I worked at Walmart. I had that like corporate life before and I completely went 180 and did the personal trainer yoga instructor thing. I never meant to buy a yoga studio. Like that was never part of the path. And
Yeah.
then I never intended to be like a full-fledged audio visual studio. But I'm grateful for like that I did work through that and get those skills. One of my teachers, Maddie, completely redid the website so that we could have those virtual archives. I'm very grateful to her for that. And so I said, fine, I'll give it one last go. Like I'm gonna figure the internet stuff out. So I called it was AT&T and we went back and forth and back and forth. And what ended up happening, for those of if anybody cares, is that we were the last ones on fiber in that building. And they had to go like I'm getting to a point because then you're going to take over after this. But these guys came out and they would not listen to me. And they kept making me feel like lady, just go with it. Just get a Wi-Fi extender. That'll solve your problem. I tried that. It didn't solve the problem. Had them come back out. They kept not listening to me. And I was like, you don't understand. And I am not afraid to be a little bit of a bitch when I feel like somebody is purposely either talking down to me or not listening to my concerns. And I'm like, I pay $100 a month for internet here that is not working once I walk 10 feet that way. That shouldn't be the case. Please fix it. And I was just like, so Cynthia, you became my, I
You
am going
gave
to
me
go.
daily
Like, yes, I
updates.
was like a dog with a bone. Like, I know I've got a mission now. Fix it. So they had to go under the building and pull the cable out, like pull the actual fiber out. And it was fraying. And that's why, like, it was an actual hardware issue. It was fraying and they had to replace it. And when they did that, I haven't had a single issue with internet like since then for the last, I guess it's been like a year now. And
Yeah.
everything works perfectly because I didn't give up. And I would love for you to kind of talk about then how that, because it's like our mat is a reflection of our world. So you didn't give up. We didn't give up on this for you to be able to have this avenue with your disability. How has that kind of shown up for you in your life with your disability?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for all that work that you did because
I'll tell you, don't thank me because I didn't have a good attitude about it at first, but
but you went above and beyond to make sure that that happened. And it was somebody who listened to me. You were someone who listened to me when I said, "Hey, this is important to me." And I'm so grateful for that. I had an experience with, as I said, I started at Yoga Story in 2019. I had an experience with a yoga class. I'm not going to say where, but somewhere in the area around here as I was trying to find where my place was, where the lighting was extremely dark in the room and I couldn't see what this person was doing and their cues were not good. And I asked her after the session, I said, "Hey, would you mind? I have a vision impairment." I was very upfront about it. And I'm not one who has always loved talking about my disability, but I've over the years it's gotten to be a thing where I'm like, you know what? If I'm making it better, it may be better for me, but it's also making it better for someone else. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But this person was like, well, that's the way I do my class, and everybody else is fine with it that way. And I was like, okay, well, I guess this isn't the spot for me then. And I think we see that a lot today in our society where when you start taking away things that help someone who has a disability, you are also taking away things that help the masses. And I'm going to give an example that was presented to me in a Microsoft presentation actually a few years ago. And that's that if you put in a wheelchair ramp, you're helping the person who's in a wheelchair, but you're also helping the person who has a baby stroller. You're also helping the person who broke their leg and is on crutches that day. You're helping somebody who maybe is taking grandma to a performance and they're actually able to get her where she, to be able to do that. So you're not just doing these things because somebody has a disability, but you're helping society in general to be able to live better, right? So thank you.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of goes back to a yogic principle in that we consider like all of our energy in this one big think of it like a net, or you can think of it as a lake. I like the analogy of Indra's net. And Indra is a Hindu deity. And that this net is woven, and each junction of the rope is a jewel. And so that would be representative of each human consciousness, each person, whether it be physical or not physical. And each time that net moves, or if you're thinking of it in the lake analogy, each time you throw a rock in and it ripples out. And so that doesn't mean that we have to like take down our boundaries and be yes people and people pleasers. It's more of what are you contributing to that overall consciousness, that overall energetic imprint on the world? How are you a reflection of those around you? And so when you are able to put into that collective, into that consciousness, good energy and the ability to make someone feel seen. And that's why I kept going with yoga. It's because someone made me feel seen, make someone else feel seen, and then that person makes someone else feel seen and important. And then that's how the ripple effect happens. It's not about cutting the net.
Yeah.
Use
Yeah,
a
totally.
completely appropriate analogy for the time. It's not about cutting that net to cut out a big circle because we don't need that part of the net anymore. It's not, whatever you think that value of that net should be, and we're going to cut that. All that does is weaken the net.
Yeah, you put a hole in it and now everything
It's,
comes out of the
yeah,
net.
exactly. It doesn't strengthen the net, it weakens the net.
Right.
So yeah, so that's that definitely always sticks with me, is that analogy of Indra's net. So
Love that.
thank you for being part of our net, Cynthia, and for giving me in that moment too, that I needed that task. I needed that win from that internet. So I got that win, and I needed
Well,
that at that point in time.
thank you for making me feel seen. It's really appreciated. I love being able to continue my practice, to hear about what's happening this week, after class and all the things. So it motivates me to keep going. It makes me feel, as I said, part of a community, even if I'm not walking in the door. So I feel valued, and thank you for
Good.
that.
You are valuable, and that.
When I think about benefits of yoga, and
Uh-huh.
and I didn't touch on this, but because of my vision, you can probably see it on the camera, but my eyes move all the time,
Yeah,
which
okay.
means when you say focus and on your nidra, right?
Yeah.
I don't ever focus. Um, so my balance is really bad because of
Mm,
that.
right.
But what yoga does for me is that I'm constantly working on my balance. Because
Hmm.
my balance is so poor, I'm obviously more prone to falls, right? But I continue to work on that all the time. So when I'm doing, one-legged Tadasana, I am not, I am the tree that's moving all over the
There
place,
you
right?
go.
My foot goes to my ankle, but I'm continuing to work. And it's not about that again, it's not about the perfection of the pose. It's that I'm continuing to work on it. And it's something I don't know if I would do just on a regular basis of, hey, I need to work on my balance today. No.
Just stand on one leg while
Yeah,
I
I'm
shuffle.
not going to do that.
Yeah.
But I feel like it makes me stronger and it gives me that confidence that I'm working on that balance and that, you know, there's hope.
Yep.
One day I will get my foot up there to my knee, but
Well, now that I know that when I teach on Saturdays, I'm just gonna start whispering into the microphone. 100%. We'll have our little inside jokes then.
if I'm inside, if I'm in the studio, I'm going to be pushing on a
Oh,
wall.
no.
That's why I always try to go to a wall if I'm in
We'll
class.
save you
But
a spot then. Cynthia is also, just so that everybody knows, and I'll put it in the show notes, a very accomplished pottery artist. I guess is the correct potterist part. I don't know what the
I'm a
name is.
potter. Yeah,
A
I'll take
potter.
potter.
There we go. A potterist. She's a very accomplished potter, very artistic, and has had her works displayed in art collections. And she has given me a wonderful mug, which unfortunately I broke. So I'll have to buy another one from you. But we'll put that in the show notes so you can go and see her wonderful works of art. And I just want to thank you so much for joining me today and for telling your story.
Thank you so much for the venue, Lynn. I really appreciate it.
Awesome.